Good morning. My name is Councilman Gil Schussler from City of Tampa, via Hart. Welcome to the Friday, October 28th, 2022 Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board meeting. All members are voting members are asked to attend in person and to comply with Florida Government Sunshine. We are waiting for one more to have a physical quorum. So in the meantime, call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call vote so we can turn things here. Cheryl.
Sure. Commissioner Myers is excused absence. Gloria Mills excused. Glenn Brown.
Here.
Deborah Knoll and Mike Lazy are absent. Artie Fryer.
Here.
Craig Purcell excused absent. David Newell.
He's excused. Sunday.
Emily Hugart.
Here.
Christina Melling.
Here.
Beth Pasek.
Here.
Mark Harshberger.
Here.
Deborah LaQuinta.
Here.
Dr. Leslie Gordon.
Here.
Alicia Wiggins.
Here.
Councilman Schischler.
Here.
Kristen Thomas.
Here.
Indira Chambers. John Vargas.
Here.
Cassandra Blalock.
Here.
So we are waiting for one person for an in-person quorum. Chair, can you please call for a vote of consent for remote member participation?
Thank you. I'll call for a vote of consent for remote member participation. Need a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Glenn Brown, second.
Did you catch that, Cheryl?
Who was the first?
Beth Pasek.
Thank you.
Second by Glenn Brown. Okay, it'll be a negative affirmation. So if anybody has any objections, please state your name and your objection. Seeing or hearing none, motion's approved. Thank you very much. Is there anybody here for public comment? See anybody? Anybody registered for public comment?
I don't see anybody online.
Very good, thank you. Since we can't do any action items or anything until we do have a quorum, it's probably prudent to let's move on to our status reports so that we can wait for our 10th member to get here and establish a quorum. First order on the status reports is a Sunshine Line update. Karen Smith.
So good morning, everyone. I'm going to be doing the update. I'm not Karen and not Scott Clark. My name is Jerry Stickney. I'm the interim director currently for Sunshine Line. It's a pleasure to be here in person. I'll jump into the update. For Sunshine right now, our big focus has really been with our driver shortage. So fortunately right now we're sitting at 81% driver capacity. Earlier in the year we were down to 55% driver capacity. So we've been pushing those efforts to increase that, which in turn more drivers, more trips, more service. So it's been a good thing to start moving in that direction. And we've updated with placards on all of our vehicles for people to see that you apply for the county. We've been doing open hiring, so we're pushing through. Proud of the team for their pre-service training and getting that rolling. So we're moving in the right direction. We currently still have 11 driver positions open that we're still recruiting for as well. So we're continuing to move forward on that in the right direction. Our current trips, our status right now for looking at last year at this time to now, we're up 20% for our trips per month. So again, trending in the right direction, getting back to some pre-COVID numbers and looking at that regard. So for me, it's a good correlation for our driver capacity, aligning and doing some outreach to get our trip count up as well. Our Tri-County grant project, we're looking to get that to board on 11/16. Final agreements being signed with TSDA for that collaboration. So with that, we're moving forward with our training with our team. We've got our customer service teams trained. We work with PSTA for the referral process. So that way, once it's approved, we can get that up and running and start referring our citizens as soon as it's approved, but looking at that 16th. So come the 17th, we're planning ready to roll. Like I said, we're leaning forward to get that moving. The CTD audit for this year, we had 0 findings. We just got that back. So again, Central 19, they very proud of them for that report, pulling everything together. So 0 findings on that. And the final piece I had, pending any questions as well, a hurricane update for Ian, looking at our response as part of the evacuation working group for the county. Sunshine Line, we were able to complete a total of 543 trips for that week. Of that, as a mix of our evacuation trips to shelters, to other residents, as well as dialysis, medical, and last-minute grocery shopping for supplies for the storm. Our call center, they took in 1,197 inbound calls. With that, it's helping book, answering questions for residents who have, just want to look for information of the storm, where to go, things like that, and another 522 outbound calls for checking up on our citizens, for people that are calling and booking those trips as well. So great collaboration with HART, with school board, with Mercy Operations Center for the hurricane response. I'm very proud of that as well. Those are a few key highlights for my staff report. Any questions for Sunshine for myself? Mark?
First, if you don't mind, please pass along to Scott Clark from everybody at TDCB that we give best wishes. Scott's always been a wonderful part of the program here, and your report is excellent. So thank you for being here today in this place. But if you get in contact with Scott, let him know that we care for him and best wishes.
Definitely will.
You mentioned at the beginning something about placards on the buses. Are they actually advertising on the bus that we're looking to?
Yeah, advertising. Yes, sir. There's a QR code that you can scan, and I would like to say it's worked. We're asking them. Some people say they saw them, and some just said they saw it online. So, but we're making those efforts. So yeah, we're hiring QR code and trying to do our part to get it out there.
Great service. Thank
You are.
Any other questions? I have a couple, if I may. Number one, what's the, how long were we able to drive through the storm? How long before we were actually shut down, not able to assist any residents?
So we, if I remember correctly, the storm, and I think it hit us through Wednesday. So we were in operation until about 7, 8 o'clock at night. With Hillsborough Fire Rescue and EM, they didn't want to do any night operations. So basically we were out until it got dark. The sustained winds, we never really got to that point, that dynamic, but it was waiting out till it got dark for safety and security of people. So
I know Hart stable till about 35, 38 miles an hour. That's dark buses.
yeah, and we stick within that same model, that 35, 38. One of the things that we've been focused on this year with emergency management and others is, not just the winds for our buses to be safe, but then our employees getting back home to a safe spot as well. So, yeah.
And my last question is, have we utilized career sources
Yes.
for placement of potential drivers?
Yeah, we worked on those. Scott Clark met with them a little while back. We've been working with HR, incorporating them within our information as well. So they've been a piece of it as well with HR and recruiting.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One question,
Yes.
Darren Chambers, Grace Tampa Bay. Was there any consideration given to possibly increasing that wage for the drivers? Because I know that presented a challenge when trying to get people to be interested.
Absolutely. So a few things that we've worked on in the last couple of years, well, probably feels like a couple of years, last probably 6 to 8 months. We had a requirement for a minimum of 1 year driving experience for passenger transport. We waived that to 1 year for hire transport. So if you're working full-time, Napa Auto Parts, Uber delivery, whatever that may be, to open it up to make you eligible, we have a 5-week training program for all of our pre-service staff. Without that 1 year driver for paratransit experience, you do an additional 2 weeks for hands-on peer coach training to make sure that you have that. So that helped us for recruiting as well. And with financially, we've been able to, the county went to $15 minimum wage last year, and we did a equity rollout, and with some cost increases, we're up to starting wage at $16.48 for operators. And we're looking at, implementing a scale of that starting 1648, and then years of experience rating as well.
One follow-up question. Do you know if this increase in wage was communicated to Career Source? Because that could be an essential piece in updating the job order on Employed Florida, you know?
I'm not sure. I know HR is really that lead for us in that coordination, but I'll be sure to follow up after this.
Okay,
to make sure that-
I'll follow up as soon as I.
Yeah, we'll be sure to input, so yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
it's
you.
been a great thing. So all those things combined, I think is really moving us to getting that driver recruitment going.
That'll be good for resources. They're good resource and good asset. Okay, good. Thank you. Anybody, any other questions? Very good. Thank you, sir, for your report. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheryl, Mr. Chambers is here. We now have a forum, I believe. So we can.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we go back to the first order of business, approval of minutes. Entertain, I'm sure everybody's seen them. Anybody has any questions? Entertain a motion for approval of minutes from August 26th, 2022 meeting.
Glenn Brown, move to approve.
Second.
Jeff Pasek, second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Negative approval. Anybody voting against this, please state your name and your reason. Hearing or seeing none, motion is approved. Thank you very much. Okay, first action item is Angels Unaware Coordination Contract. Karen Smith.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce kind of the next three together and then just go through each one because they're all the same. Coordination contract is a contract between the county as the CTC and agencies who provide their own transportation service. So there are three agencies in the next three next three action items that are agencies who currently have coordination contracts with us, whose contract is about to expire, so we need to enter into a new one. It's a requirement for them to qualify for the 5310 funding that they receive from DOT. So the first agency is Angels Unaware. They're an agency that provides service for persons with developmental disabilities mainly and physical disabilities. They transport their residents to day programs, medical treatment, whatever activities their resident clients attend. Last year, they provided just almost 9,000 trips for their 33 clients. They have 8 vehicles. The average cost per trip is $6.03. A lot of that is driven by the fact that their staff they don't have dedicated drivers necessarily. Their staff are drivers, so the cost is a little different. So we need approval from this board to enter into a new contract, and then the contract itself will go to the Board of County Commissioners to sign.
What's the terms of the contract, the duration?
They're a 3-year contract.
3-year contract?
We monitor them each year, but they're a 3-year contract.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Glenn Brown, I have a question. Have there been any compliance issues and concerns in the past?
No. Then we go and communicate that with DOT and their concerns from that side as well.
Thank you.
Were there a problem with were there any issues when they come back through this board, or would they go, how would they be addressed? How would they be handled out?
If we had issues, we normally will try to address them partly with DOT because we're funding their service.
Okay,
And then if we can't, usually that's enough, we can work it out. DOT can help us resolve any issues with them. If there are enough issues, you can remove the contract, or if it's extreme, you would terminate it and move them.
okay. All right, any other questions regarding the nature of this coordination contract? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the Angels Unaware Coordination Contract for the next 3-year period.
Christina Melling, so move.
Second.
Cassandra Blanchard, second.
Okay. Cheryl, did you get that?
Yes, I have it. Thank you.
Very good, okay. Again, we'll do a negative vote. If there's anybody who is against the contract, please indicate your name and your objection. Hearing none and seeing none, motion's approved. Thank you very much. Okay, then you've got the Grace Point Coordination Contract.
So the next agency, like I said, it's a coordination contract, same concept, same type of contract. The agency is mental health care, which is now operating as Grace Point. They provide services for behavioral health, mental health clients. A lot of their population are homeless clients. So they're providing transportation to those appointments and for daily living activities for those clients. They have 18 vehicles and last year provided 18,300 trips for 8,000 clients. Their clients are not necessarily residents, so their client population is larger. Their average cost per trip was $26.52. And again, we have not had any issues in all with compliance with that agency, and DOT has not indicated any either. So this would allow them to continue that relationship and to be eligible for 310 funding again. So I just need approval from the board. Same thing to enter into a new contract.
Any questions regarding the Grace Point coordination contract? I do have one. If you don't mind. Don't need to be a pastor of pain, but the funding for these contracts, this is funded through the BOCC?
The county provides no direct funding for this contract.
Okay.
The agencies have their own funding, some from 5310, some from whatever other funding is available to those nonprofit agencies. The county itself is not providing direct funding for this contract.
Well, let me rephrase it. They reimburse the county for the actual, for the trips?
No, there's literally, it's a coordination contract, so they provide us information on the trips that they provide, and we monitor them for compliance with certain requirements. But there's no funds involved in the contract at all.
Okay, so these organizations provide their own vehicles, and this is just they're not using Sunshine Line vehicles.
Right, they're not using Sunshine Line vehicles, and they typically get funding for either some or all of their vehicles through the 5310 grant, which comes to DOT.
Well, there just seemed to be a disparity between the per trip run on the last ages.
Yeah, and some of it's because if there's like a resident facility with a staff person who's also the house person, maybe be the driver, then you don't have additional costs. If you have enough that you need dedicated drivers, it drives the cost up. So it will fluctuate between agencies.
Okay, okay, cool. Any further questions regarding the Grace Point coordination contract? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve. What's the duration?
3 years.
Another 3 year, for the next 3 years.
Glenn Brown, I move to approve.
Alexia Wiggins, second.
Thank you very much. Your motion is second. Negative approval. Anybody who's voting against it, please indicate your name and why. Seeing none, hearing none, this motion is approved. Thank you very much. Okay, item number C is the Human Development Center coordinating contract.
I'm actually tired of seeing me standing up here. The third coordination contract is with Human Development Center, which provides services for persons with developmental cognitive disabilities. They have residential group homes, and they have adult day training programs, and they provide transportation for their clients too. They also take them to grocery shopping and training, daily living activities as well. They have 6 vehicles and provided 10,000 trips last year for their 24 clients. So again, it's a similar scenario to Angels Unaware in terms of the type of service and the type of client setup that they have. Their average cost is $21.62 a trip. And again, we just need approval to enter into a new contract. It would also be 3 years because their contract is expiring.
Any questions regarding the Human Development Center contract? Mr. Brown.
Again, just any compliance or issues of concern that came up over the last 3 years.
No, not at all.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, entertain a motion for the to approve the Human Development Center coordination contract for a period of 3 years.
Motion to approve that passing.
Okay, we have a second.
Second.
All right, have a motion second. Negative, anybody who's against the approval of the contract, please indicate your name and your reason. Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next item. Thank you, Karen. We appreciate that. Next item of business for action items is the TD annual operating report
Yeah, I said you'll get sick.
Got it, Jason.
Good morning. Um, Sorry, the fancy one for. So just all the technology. The annual operations report is a report that's required of each community transportation coordinator, CTC. Each year, we have to submit one report to the Transportation Disadvantage Commission that provides data on the trips that we provide Sunshine Line, which is the CTC operator, and all of the agencies that have coordination contracts. So I'll fold into one. You'll see in the report itself, which is attached to your agenda, it will show the side that is where it says CTC. That's essentially, for this purpose, is Sunshine Line service, and then all the coordination contracts will show separately in the report spreadsheet. So that would be these three agencies who you just approved this morning. Parts Paratransit Service is also included in the coordination contracts in this report. So the report is for July through June. So this is the report that you have today is for July 2021 through June 2022. Kind of the first year we're recovering from COVID. It includes, I said, the trips from Sunshine Line. There are 12 other agencies, including PART. Just for clarification for some, it does not include Medicaid service that is still out there. So Medicaid non-emergency transportation is something just to remember it's still provided, but it's not part of this report. The report itself is used, the Transportation for Disadvantaged Commission creates a statewide report that they use, partly to show the legislature what TV services, what's being provided and why it makes sense to continue funding the program. It's also, the data is also used in, parts of the data are used in the CTC evaluation, which is the next presentation, which I'm not doing. But some of that data is used as part of that evaluation. It used to be used as part of the formula that determined the funding for the Transportation Disadvantage Grant. It is not used for that anymore, starting last year. So, it's been around a little while. Just to point out, in this particular AOR, the kind of the changes you'll start to see after COVID-19. Aging services sites started reopening, but they started reopening later than we had anticipated, so it wasn't until April of this reporting period. So while there's an increase in service, it will be much more significant this year now that they're nearly all open. So you'll see that a little bit of that. You'll see it starting, but it will continue. And we were still now, but during that period in particular, we were still in a period where outreach events, all those activities and community activities where we would go and provide people information about our service are still either not being held or being held remotely. So I think there was still an issue about people being aware of the program. So service levels did not increase all the way back to normal yet. And we're still experiencing the driver shortage that Jerry talked about earlier, which limits what we can do in general. So I'll just hit highlights of the report itself. If you have particular questions about something, I'm glad to either answer them, bring it back to the next meeting. So overall, I mean, the rolled up numbers of service provided in Hillsborough County, 17,073 people were transported, which is up 14% from the year before, and I expect that to continue to increase. Like I said, aging services was not reopened, and they're normally a significant part of the clients that we serve. We also know we have to do some more outreach for people to realize that the service is available. 407,000 door-to-door trips were provided, which is an increase of 68% from 2021. So you can clearly see that people started actually going out and taking trips again. So that's a good sign. The year before, there were literally some of the smaller nonprofits have already, had any trips at all, trying to keep their clients safe. There were, while you will see in the report itself that the number of bus pass trips increased, I will explain that in a minute. The number of bus passes issued this year was 9,223. That is actually down 30% from the year before. And I went back and looked and I saw how much down. It's mostly down in 31-day passes. Or we're not entirely sure why. It happened at the same time that Flamingo passes started. So I think there's some hesitance to go actually get the card. A discount rider has to get the ID one, and they have to go themselves and get the card themselves, and then we can load it. But that part they have to participate in. There was some hesitancy there. I think that is getting better. Like we're seeing those numbers go up, but I think initially there was some pushback about doing that. It was also when we changed to income-only based eligibility for bus passes, but I looked at those, the drop was across the board. And when we changed that, 95% of our clients were low income anyway, so we don't think that's the driving thing, but it happened at the same time, so we're not entirely sure the cause. But we are working with our communications department. They're going to do a public information piece to highlight the bus pass program, so hopefully we will get it out there that that program exists and it can help you. And those numbers should go back up because we know we need people to be riding the bus to get where they need to go. So that we can help them. I just broke out the trip purpose just to get an idea, because sometimes that is a question when where kinds of trips are we doing. And I looked at previous years. It is a similar breakout, and I was kind of surprised. So I didn't show last year versus this year. The percentages didn't really change all that much. 30% of what we do is taking people either to grocery stores or now to aging services nutrition sites. But as I said, that was only a couple of months of this period. So people going to get food is a big part of what we do, which I think it's a good thing. At least we know that they're able to go and get food. It's a concern. We do a lot of grocery trips. Medical, surprisingly, is only 20% of what we're doing. This is overall, so this is not just Sunshine Line, but still. And employment, 7%, education, 15%. Education and training include, it's mainly for adults going to training. It's not necessarily school, it's not school children going to education. And life-sustaining is the AOR's wording for that category, so it doesn't necessarily mean urgent life-sustaining. It's going to be anything else that's important for someone to do in their life, but it isn't counted in those other categories. And that's, 20, or more than a fourth of what we was provided. For that time period, resources that were used, there were 296 vehicles system-wide. And I said, we're including parts paratransit service in this report, but that does not include parts fixed route buses. That's just the paratransit. And 3.4 million miles for just the door-to-door service. The miles, which makes sense because we have 68% more trips, are up almost 600,000 from the year before when COVID was really locking everything down. So the miles driven are up 21%, which if you're out driving around to potential traffic. There are 590 drivers in that whole system of drivers. That's including some of the agencies where the staff are drivers, so they're not necessarily dedicated drivers, but that's people who drive food to transport this, do these trips. The resources for providing all of that service, $19.3 million, which is up almost 1.5 from the year before, but that's probably to be expected because we did more than 50% more trips altogether. So I do like to highlight every year that 10.7 million of that is local funds. It's either property tax funds that are going to HART, it's the county's cash contribution, it's fares, it's donations from to local nonprofits, but the local community is really contributing to providing this service. So we do get in each of these agencies and Sunshine Line and HART are getting some other funding, but a lot of it is coming from the local community. And the average cost per trip, which is going to reflect the bus pass trips, was $27.73. That was the one thing that I did not mention, which those of you who've been here for a little while remember, is that bus passes, we are finally able to count bus trips in a way that mostly makes sense. When we started previously, for anyone who hadn't been here, the report normally made us count a one-day pass as one trip. It still does. We're still stuck with that. They never come home. They just go. But it used to make us count a 31-day pass as 12 trips, which we knew was not accurate. Once we got the Flamingo swipe cards last July, August, when we started implementing that, we can now count all the swipes. We get a report every month of the swipes from HART. So the average, we used to estimate 32. The actual average is 37.8. So that's the bus pass trips that are reflected in this report. So at least what we need to work on figuring out why people are not requesting more passes, we at least are able to count the trips in a way that reflects the actual usage. But like I said, the actual entire report is in your package. So if you have any specific questions, you can either let Tosh know and I can bring back, or do not. Otherwise, we just need a motion from acknowledging that the board has received the report. We've already submitted it to the TD Commission, but this board has to have received it as well. And then I will need to get a copy to you, Josh, so that we can get a signature.
Okay, some questions.
Yes.
What percent of property do you use?
During this period, we were using 125. We just changed to using 150. We started that. That was approved at the last meeting in August, so it started in September. But we did move that up to try to do that.
Mark, you have a question?
Actually, just a comment, really. Karen, I was really impressed by the figures you gave earlier in the report about the increase in ridership, 14% in one category and 68% in another category. And then you commented that it's good that the local citizens, the elderly population are getting back out into the community, making visits, whether it's doctor's visits, shopping, going to church, stuff like that. I think that's wonderful. So I'm glad you shared those figures. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think to go along with that, I think a lot of it is increasing some of those adult day programs where people are not going as frequently or so those programs really matter.
Yeah, that personal interaction for individuals is excellent. Thank you. Critical.
Yeah, one question on the bus passes being down, I can't remember what percentage, but do they have to physically go get the bus passes? Did you mention that, or what's the process for them to get bus passes?
If it's a person who does not, if they qualify for a discount pass,
Yes, kind of passes, right?
then they have to go physically to whatever transit station and get, it's a pass that's an ID. It has a logo on it. They get it once and then that's it.
So they just have to go one time, not
Right.
updated at all.
There's an expiration at some point, but it's, not even once a year. I want to say it's years, I think, So yeah, they have to go that initial time to get it. If it's a person who doesn't qualify for a discount pass, then we have a stack of cards.
And I wanted to comment on the bus passes. I know as school district, we used to purchase the 30-day passes in bulk for a lot of our students, that we distributed them to them. But once the process changed, we were no longer able to do that. So I know, I'm sure it's not 30%,
Right.
but I know we used to purchase passes in bulk, and we can no longer do that because we can't make that student go get that pass. So I know that was a drop. We don't buy them anymore.
Yeah, it stops some people, but it is a one-time thing. So if you can get past that one time, yeah, it's, in the end, it's helpful for them, but that initial.
I'm curious to see how, with the increase in the poverty, how it's going to affect that employment percent. If it would go up now that they would have an opportunity for it to increase.
Right. That'll be a good list for me to put a note in my next year to highlight that. I will.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. Ms. Alexia, like how many bus passes were you guys purchasing?
A lot, like, it's probably thousands of dollars at a time. I mean, we were purchasing stacks of bus passes at once.
And in a previous life, I worked in retail, and we always said, we have to figure out a way to get to yes. And so was there any consideration, Ms. Karen, to getting to a yes with the school district? Because,
So that wasn't, that's not, they didn't purchase from us.
oh,
They
they-
purchased
okay.
from her.
Yeah, well,
Okay, from her
yeah,
line, okay, okay, I'm
I
sorry.
think she was just saying that they had a similar.
yeah,
I'm
just
sorry.
similar, yeah, that drum, yeah.
And they get-
Okay, any other questions? I do have one, two questions and a comment. The additional funding, the incremental funding over with the county of Hart supplies, state, federal, donations, yes, no?
The,
The 19 million total and 10 million comes from.
most of the rest of it is, though there's the TV commission grant from the state, there's some state funding, and then there's some, there's APD funding for a lot of the nonprofit agencies. It's a
It's a mix.
mix, yeah.
It's a big amount.
Yeah.
Okay, my comment is, thank you very much, it's a very good report. My comment is, this is hidden, it's buried within other reports. Prior to becoming and getting involved with this group, never heard of it. Never had, no clue. I saw the little blue van riding around, I didn't know anything about it. This is 3.4 million miles that this organization provides. We're talking, was it 17,000 riders? Maybe that was the right number. You know, some of these people rely upon this almost daily. It's a 24 trip average of the number of door-to-door trips. I know everybody in staff has a ton of stuff to do. This is really a story that the public doesn't know about. People don't know the gap that this fills. And I know I've said this before, at least within the city of Temple Terrace, because they go, what do we give the money to Hart for? This is the kind of stuff that we give the money to Hart. This is where our taxes go. And this is a story. I wish we could get it out to the public a lot better than we do, because it really is a good safety net. And it's probably deficient in many ways. But it would take, like with anything else, it takes some additional funding to make it all happen. But you guys do a heck of a job, really do. And I'll take a motion to certify that we've received and accept the annual report.
Glenn Brown, I'll move.
Your Chambers, second.
Okay, Cheryl, you got that, I trust. Anyway, we'll take a negative roll call. Anybody who's against the accepting the report, please indicate your name and reason. There to be none, reports accepted unanimously. Thank you very much. Very good report. Okay. Last but not least, community transportation coordinating evaluation. Joshua Warren.
All right, hey, everybody, good morning, Joshua Barber, staff. Here to do our community transportation coordinator evaluation. We do this every year after the close of the fiscal year to evaluate the performance of the Sunshine Line. Also included in here is we do our customer survey every year. That's both our door-to-door customers, that is those receiving Sunshine Line service, as well as customers receiving a bus pass from the Sunshine Line. Those are two separate surveys. We mail those out, get responses back. It's a paper survey, both English and Spanish as well. And then there's a workbook that's filled out every year as well. That's given to us by the state. It mostly covers regulatory compliance, insurance, driver's license checks, compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and a host of other kind of more legislative-based stuff. The big areas are, of course, the customer surveys, the performance criteria evaluation, that covers the areas of reliability, service effectiveness, efficiency, availability, and safety. So I'll go over some of these performance criteria. These are laid out in our our transportation disadvantage service plan, which we approve every year. And so usually how I'd like to kind of set this up is, the fiscal year ends at the end of June. We conduct the evaluation, and then we use the results of the evaluation to inform the update of our service plan. Like I said, these performance criteria are in the service plan. So, if you all ever have any interest in looking at some other performance criteria, we definitely entertain that. But you can see the results here. On-time performance, the standard is 90%. This year we hit 89.78. So we pretty much met the standard. I mean, a little bit of rounding, we'd be right there. So not a major area of concern. Travel time, basically 95% of trips should be done in less than 90 minutes. The client spends less than 90 minutes in the vehicle. 99.57, so the standard's been met. Less than 7 road calls per 100,000 vehicle miles traveled. This year we hit 1, so definitely more than met. Trips per capita, the standard is greater than half a trip per county. 0.47 this year, so just below the standard. Once again, a little bit of rounding, we'd be right there. This is a significant improvement from last year. Last year it was 0.25 trips per capita, because of COVID. So we're seeing significant improvement there, nearly doubled, and I would expect that next year would be above the standard. Cost per trip, the standard is less than $35.91 per trip. That's based on the annual cost per trip statewide. So that gets pulled from the state's annual operating report. So as long as we're below the statewide average, we consider the standard met. For the CTC this year, $16.49. Trips per revenue hour below the standard. Our standard's greater than 2 trips per revenue hour. This year it was 1.25. Once again, an improvement from last year. But the lack of aging services trips, stuff like that, continues to kind of pull those numbers down. Greater than 5 vehicles available per 100,000 people. This year it was nearly 20. So the number of vehicles available is more than the standard for sure. And you can see the rest, call hold times, denials, well above the standard. The number of crashes continues to be, meeting the standard, as well as the number of complaints continues to really hit the mark. So looking all pretty well, all in all. So the 5-year trip trend, this is both system-wide trips, so those being done by both the CTC and our coordination contractors. And you can see the number of CTC trips as well continues to increase, continuing to push. CTC above the pre-COVID numbers, but system-wide a bit below the pre-COVID numbers. So information on our door-to-door customer survey. Like I said, we mail these out every year. We sent out 706 surveys. We got 289 back through the mail. These are, the return envelopes included, postage paid, that kind of thing. The customers don't have to pay postage to send this back to us, just to be clear. Continued success in pretty much all areas, 92% of people, or 92% satisfaction rating or above in every area that we asked about. And you can kind of see our demographics over here on the right. Sorry, the 60 and over is missing, but 74% of people use it for medical trips, 20% have Spanish as their preferred language, 40% use the service over 5 times a month. So really great. There's a lot more detail in the report in the appendix for anyone interested. And just some highlights. A lot of people very thankful for the service. They really love the drivers. Some people, really want to see their Saturday service back. They had to cut that as a result of the driver shortage. So that's one area for us to be looking at as we move forward. And sometimes the 90-minute pickup window, people have never really loved that, but so it goes. I included some quotes here from some folks who commented. Mostly praise, of course, but you can review all the comments that people included in the report itself. Bus pass customers, we had 41% return. The surveys, continued improvement in pretty much all areas, 85% satisfaction or above in all the areas that we've asked about. The bus pass customers historically are a little less satisfied than the door-to-door customers naturally. Parts of bigger service. You all know the challenges with funding and all of that they have. So this is pretty par for the course. 20% of respondents have Spanish as their preferred language. 89% use it over 5 times a month. 64% use it for medical appointments. 72% of these customers are age 60 or over. And once again, people still, nonetheless, in despite of some of the challenges, very thankful for the service that they get. Getting them to where they need to go. General driver praise, but our traditional complaint stuff that we've seen, especially in the past few years on late buses. Some drivers, some people don't like some drivers, how that goes. And the lack of bus stop amenities continues to be a big problem. There was a comment in there, someone who uses oxygen and, them having to stand in the sun waiting for a bus. They weren't satisfied. They're like, oh, I can stand across the street in the shade, but then I might miss the bus. It's like those kind of issues. So our recommendations this year are to continue to work towards restoring service to pre-COVID levels. You can see the Sunshine Line has pretty much hit that mark already, but system-wide just continuing to push those trips up, continuing to provide more service. Really looking at reinstating Saturday service when the availability is there, when we have enough drivers. Once we've covered all our other bases, is our other major recommendation. And if you all have other recommendations, of course, the evaluation is to be done in coordination with you all. So you all definitely have a say on other areas to recommend improvement. With that, I'm just asking for a motion to approve the CTC evaluation and forward on to the State Commission of Transportation Disadvantage.
Do we have any questions?
I have a question, Josh. And I know there are logistical issues in terms of the 90-minute phase and that sort of thing. However, have we ever put together something to try to help with that issue? If I think about it, I think, well, I've got to wait up to 90 minutes and then say maybe the bus is, at that 90-minute, and then I have a 30-minute ride. So then, I have a couple hours, so about 4 hours. 8 of my hours theoretically were sleeping. Then I've got 16 hours, 4 hours going out and back, just kind of waiting and riding on the thing or being spent during that time. Have we thought about maybe a way to address that and try to help people? So, because I think that would help a little bit, and that is the most common thing when I hear people talk about these rides or waiting for these buses. But I understand the logistical issues. But is there something being put together to think about that or try to help with that?
I know, Sunshine Line was talking about a 60-minute window for a while before the driver shortage really hit. I'm not sure. It was more of an internal standard, if I recall. Yeah,
I can speak on it. So we actually did test and pilot a 60-minute window for our pre-pickup. And we ended up having a lot of issues and concerns with late trips, not having enough time to pick them up in that 60 minutes, even at an hour out to get them to their appointment on time. So we had a lot of late trips due to the 60-minute window as a shared ride service. And that was the biggest issue that we saw with routing. So we tested it, we did it for a few months, and we just saw our on-time performance being impacted. And the only shift that we did was that 60-minute window. And that's really the big piece of that prior, is to allow that time for shared ride, both people, and to get them on time. And that's really, I would love to be able to do it as well. It's just we run into, what's more important, getting to your appointment on time or having to wait an extra 60 minutes or 30 minutes. It's difficult. I agree, it's a pain. But from an operational perspective, we tried it, and it just, on the back end, we were late to trips.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, are we thinking of a way to help with that? You know what I mean? It'd be nice to have something together. I understand logistically, it's very difficult because it's a shared ride. However, there may be some things we can think about to try to improve that in some way. Yeah, maybe help people with that issue.
Yeah, definitely open. We'll continue to look at that as well. And we look at those reports all day, and we even track the how many are picked up beyond 60 minutes. But it's still, if you're, still have to be ready in 90 minutes, but we've been given that 60 minutes. We'll continue to monitor it and keep looking at it, but definitely from their perspective too, I agree. It is tough.
Thank you. Any other questions? I gotta go.
Yes, this is Artie Fryer. I'd just like to, well, first of all, my intention is to vote to approve this. However, because the work that Sunshine Line does is so important, I think it's important when we have 14% of complaints, whatever they are, that I think for our perspective as a board, we should at least suggest or at least be informed about efforts, and sort of saying this on the heels of what Glenn just mentioned. I think it's going to be important for us to at least demonstrate what we're doing to resolve those complaints, even if they're difficult. I think it's good for us as a board to hear what's being done. And if we can be involved in any way of brainstorming to come up with whatever the complaints are, and I'm saying that especially because of the population that's being served, I would think it would not be to our advantage if that population thought that and weren't able to see that their issues are being addressed. So that's just a suggestion that we at least take into consideration, just to make sure that we're showing that we're addressing those, and that we as a board can be informed as to what's being done.
Thank you, Artie. I know in the past what we've done is we've provided all of the comments to Sunshine Line. And I think Scott in the past has directly, because a lot of the survey respondents provide their name and information, contact number and all of that, and have reached out to the client directly to kind of discuss any complaints that have arisen through this. So I'd be happy to provide that to Jerry again and kind of go through that process this year as well.
To your point on that, could we receive in a future meeting a summary of what those types of things were, more detailed? So that there's something systemic that we can possibly address that. Any other questions?
Yes, Beth Passick. What are the current barriers? Is it just financial, or to adding Saturdays back on, or even partial Saturdays, times a month? What are the biggest barriers? Because that seems to be a major issue and that would really benefit our clients.
Jerry.
Yeah, so with the driver shortage was the big thing where we ended up having our Saturday drivers were being pulled for Monday. We were short Monday to not be able to sustain service for medical dialysis and other things like that. So really it comes back to looking at the driver shortage, because we pull from our week people, then help cover Saturday, and then because we're shortage, and then we're short during the week where our bulk of our trips are. And that was the biggest piece of it. So really, getting that final driver capacity back, and then looking at sustainability of what's practical to sustain countywide for this as well. So.
Question, are there Saturday only drivers, or is it, is your pool just all of, I'm wondering if it would be an option for someone that maybe doing a part-time job that only drove for Sunshine Line on Saturdays?
So yeah, we have Monday to Friday drivers and Tuesday to Saturday drivers, what we have. And that's actually one of the things we're looking at with our HR department of what options there are with potential part-time work or shifting, shift differential, different things that we can look at to entice it, but also ensure, even with the trips increasing that we see with our normal Monday to Friday, that increase is going up. The east side of the county, Plant City, Waimama, they're growing, and the more drivers we're adding, we're just seeing more trips bulk up in Monday to Friday as well. So it's, and that's what we're looking at as well, to ensure that when we open Saturday again, we can it's worth it, and it can sustain and make an impact as well. not just to open it to say we have Saturday service again, but you can't do this, 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 and this, you know. So it's something where we're definitely looking at, and part-time work and support is something that's on the table that we are reviewing. I still don't know all the pieces of what we can do to make that work, but it's something I've talked with HR and others to see what that looks like.
You have made a very substantial improvement in the driver capacity, because I think you were in the 50s or in the
55.
55 a couple months ago, and you're up to 81. So I just don't want us to forget about that. I think it's something that we really keep tabs on and try to get implemented again, because I do think Saturday trips for our clients are important.
To that issue, my question was going to be, you know, what's our threshold? How many drivers do we need to put Saturday back on the schedule? You've answered it, so you're working on it. But, you know, maybe the part-time drivers, just we're having drivers cycle out of Hart, they retire. Maybe they don't want to retire fully, and they're willing to take on a Saturday shift. They're already experienced. So it's just a, you know, just a thought.
And same with our retired operators that don't want to work full-time anymore as well. So it's definitely on the table, and are open to suggestions as well. And, you know, we want to make it sustainable and make an impact when we bring it back. So
We're here to guide them, just throwing
Absolutely.
ideas. Can you put up that metrics chart, one of the first ones? That, yeah, a comment on the trips per revenue hour, up to 1.25. Is that just due to the size of the county? Is it just the square mileage that we got to cover? Or is there something else in play? My background's in accounting, and I see some variance, and I'm going to try and figure out what the variance is being caused by. So that's I'm just trying to rationalize.
I'll have to follow up. Some of these are system-wide, so
Right.
including our coordination contractors, or some are just the CTC. So I'll double check.
With my tongue firmly played with my cheek, you're going to work on the first one, right? Get that last little bit for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Deborah LaKenta. I get a question. Is it possible to maybe have like an RFP or something for Saturday service for maybe not-for-profits or other people that maybe have contracts with the CTC that have vehicles available on Saturday? Something, you know, something a little bit different where it's not just Sunshine Line, but a representative of Sunshine Line that's approved through the CTC for weekends?
yeah, so we, I don't know if Karen wants to speak on that in the contract, but we just went to bid for a contract for our CAP contract and opened it up to other TNCs and others, and we didn't get a lot. What we ended up getting was not something that we able to sustain something like that, but that's also something that's on the table that we're looking at as well. Because if it's out there, if they meet the requirements, if they support it, and back to the same groups that are already in the Good 10, you know, they have it, you know, so that's a great idea, and I'm definitely going to take that back to review and look at.
I know I saw an RFP in the past for this, but I think it was for Heart Plus. But however, what I would like to do is maybe look at having more than one provider, because we're a smaller agency, or smaller agencies, maybe it'll help and support where, you know, they already have clients that we're transporting within this demographic. So I think it'd be important maybe to have an RFP and say, okay, we're going to have multiple possible agencies help or providers help, you know, and then maybe ease into it a little bit that way until maybe Sunshine Line gets staffed up to where they're able to, you know, take it back over. I mean, it's just a thought, because we do weekends, and, you know, it is a big thing for people to be able to go places on the weekend. Thank you.
Staff seems to be taking copious notes, so this is good. Hopefully we get some activity out of this. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Seeing or hearing none, entertain a motion to accept the community transportation coordination evaluation and pass it forward as required.
I motion to approve. This is Deborah LaKenta.
Any second?
This is Glenn Brown, I'll second.
Okay. Again, anybody wanting to disapprove, please indicate your name and your reasoning. Either hearing or seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, go back to our status. Was there somebody here who had to leave? Wasn't there? Had an action item or something that was leaving?
Yes, I do have to leave.
Okay.
I apologize.
Just, we just want to make sure we have a quorum. We're done. I think we're done. Any other needs for a quorum? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Status reports then, did Sunshine Light update, and next is the Tampa News update. The City of Tampa mobility stand. Anyone?
It might be under attendees. Yeah, hold on. Kelly, you there?
Morning, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just share my presentation on the screen and please let me know if you can see this.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Fearon with City of Tampa, and I'm just going to be giving a brief presentation on our Tampa Moves mobility plan. And at the end of this, just give a quick reminder of our website, which is currently open, and we're looking for feedback from the community on what we're showing in our plan. So this presentation is really just going to answer a couple of questions. Where are we now with transportation in Tampa? How did we get here? What have we heard that everyone wants Tampa's tomorrow to look like? And how are we going to get there? So to start off with, where are we now? The City of Tampa maintains more than 2,000 lane miles of road. We're responsible for 51 bridges, over 40,000 streetlights, 65 school zones, and about 1,000 miles of sidewalk, in addition to our crosswalks, street signs, signals, and almost 300 miles of alleys. Our main funding sources for the Transportation Mobility Department include the local option gas tax that currently funds about 80% of our capital projects. Our budget every year is about $11 million on average. We pursue as many grants as we are able to. I do want to note that a large majority of grants do require local match funds. We're also funded from right-of-way permit fees, developer impact fees, as well as some funds from red light cameras and the community investment tax, which is set to expire in a few years. Property taxes do not directly fund transportation. So what do we do with that $11 million a year? We do a lot. We are out on your streets, repaving them, filling potholes, putting up new stop signs, installing flashing beacons, maintaining our signals. We have a street sweeper that is used for our bicycle lanes. But to give you an idea of the costs to maintain and install new infrastructure, a mile of sidewalk, which is what the city is currently installing every year, is about $800,000. On average, we repave 30 miles of road, and that costs about $4.8 million. A new traffic signal in today's cost is about $750,000. So I think that a lot of people in Tampa would agree that our current funding is not keeping up with our basic maintenance. 40% of our roads are in poor or failing condition. There are several bridges that need major rehabilitation, as well as our seawalls. I'm not sure if any of you saw the video during Hurricane Ian that the Tampa Police Department showed, but a signal fell along Palm Avenue. So half of our traffic signals are considered past their useful life. So I think with all that information and I'm sure just all your experience as well, we all know that there is a problem. Our streets need to be repaved. We are currently on a 75-year repaving cycle. If we repaved this road today, the next time that it would be repaved would be 2097. The roads in Tampa are unsafe. The city has adopted Vision Zero But currently, on average, 44 people die within the city of Tampa on our roads. Last year, that number was 81. Nationally, it was a trend that it increased everywhere, but that's really not a number, that is acceptable at all. In Tampa, we waste a lot of time just sitting in traffic. On average in a year, it's about 48 hours. And the city is growing rapidly. This is the same intersection shown 5 years apart, and it looks like an entire new downtown just sprung up overnight. So I'll go back and show it one more time because I'm always blown away by this. So the question, how did we get here? Feels a little bit, maybe to some of you, like Groundhog Day, which was released in 1993 and the last time that the federal gas tax was raised. The purchasing power of the gas tax rate has fallen every year and continues to decrease. Part of that is new fuel efficiency cars, electric cars, and a variety of different factors, but it just continues to decrease. So all that to say that our old ways of doing things are not going to work anymore. When Mayor Jane took office, one of the first things she did was to release Transforming Tampa's Tomorrow, and that included a deep dive of recommendations on transportation, a focus on trails and greenways, adopting Vision Zero, reinventing urban parking, and enhancing neighborhood engagement. As part of this Transforming Tampa's Tomorrow, that kicked off this mobility plan, which we call Tampa Moves. When we started the Tampa Moves, it's been about a year. Unfortunately, we did do some of the public engagement during COVID, so it was virtual, and that's why we're coming out now before the end of the year to get your feedback and make sure what we heard before, that we haven't missed anything. So we had a listen first series of meetings, and we're calling this our listen again. But what we heard from that first set of meetings was that everyone wants reliable infrastructure. They want more options for getting around. 80% of survey respondents answered that they wished they could walk, bike, or take transit more, but they just currently didn't feel comfortable doing so. So we really see that as a desire for more of this. We heard very loudly in our responses back that you want to see a robust transit system, and you really want to see streets as places, main streets and kind of different events, really get to experience a street and kind of everything that brings it to life. You definitely responded back that you want safe streets. You want to be able to take your kids to school and feel comfortable when you're using the sidewalk. And above all, you want a resilient city. Equity in decision making, that kind of your leaders are using equity and making sure it's a priority when decisions for funding and projects are made. So then how will we get to this vision of Tampa's tomorrow? To start with, we are calling our plan Tampa Moves based on our guiding principles. So you can see hopefully on the screen here that they spell out moves. So mobility for all, opportunity, vision, equity, and safety are our guiding principles, and that's how we're going to use to develop projects and develop the plan. So we're going to take those and focus in on specific areas, including maintaining our existing assets, filling walk and bike network gaps, creating streets as places, as well as making streets safer for everyone, supporting effective transit, and managing our congestion through technology. Our Tampa Moves plan has identified the gaps in the network for walking, biking, driving, and transit. And then we're going to identify potential solutions to fill these gaps and prioritize projects using a data-driven approach. We've done this for our sidewalk prioritization, and it was a really eye-opening exercise for us. We took our guiding principles, that moves, and developed evaluation criteria. So proximity to transit, proximity to schools, on a high-speed road, kind of prioritizing the areas that sidewalks should be put in first. So you can see in that bright red, those are the areas of highest priority, and then the lower priority is blue. We found this exercise to be really eye-opening because it showed us how important it is that we are proactive and really using this data-driven approach. We mapped this new prioritization with the requests that we've been receiving from the public. And one of the things we found was there's some really, really dark red, some areas of high priority in the Sulphur Springs area. And we've received very, very few requests from the public for sidewalk in that area. So it just really reiterated to us that we need to lead with data and really understand, that we're taking into account transit and just those different factors that we talked about before, and not just a reactive request from the public. So our Tampa Moves commitment is to listen first, then listen again, lead with data, distribute our resources equitably, align our resources and our policies, and seek funding from every possible source in order to achieve the greatest impact. We currently have a project website. It is tpamoves.org. And if you have a couple extra minutes and you're able to just click on the link and provide some feedback, we would love to just get your thoughts. You can kind of go in more detail into the weeds of some different bike facilities, the sidewalk network, and just really understand the gaps that are being shown and make sure that we didn't miss anything. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
May I ask a question? You mentioned that as part of this initiative that we'll be managing congestion using technology. Can you share a little bit about how that's going to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that we're really making sure we're doing is mapping a lot of the data that we have. So our transit routes and our existing sidewalks, and just kind of overlaying the different data so that we can really see like where are the gaps and the land uses, and just make sure we're thinking about everything really holistically.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Will you be applying for any of the federal infrastructure grants?
Yes, we are. We have applied for the Reconnecting grant, and that includes kind of looking at Ashley Drive and reconnecting that. And some of these grants are several years, so it's something every year we're going to be exploring what we can kind of move forward. But yeah, we definitely will be.
Have you reached out to any of the not-for-profits like Lighthouse for the Blind, or anybody that works with specific folks that have disabilities that maybe need different, to look at this a little bit different, to help them? Maybe they're not able to get on the website or the technology, or so forth. I mean, there's groups that actually work with certain individuals. Have you reached out to any of them?
I believe we have. We've been doing pretty extensive outreach for the past couple of years, but we're always happy to give this presentation again, or kind of just meet with anyone if there's someone we've missed. So we're open to any contacts, and I'll definitely write that one down and make sure.
Because they work with adults and students, so I think that would be good for the kids, for the future for them.
Definitely.
Hi. How are you, Kelly? My name is Glenn Brown. And,
Hi.
my question actually dovetails with hers, in that we are the transportation disadvantage. So people with disabilities and children, families are more our bailiwick at the moment. And I have noticed improvements downtown. I live downtown. However, again, one of the things we have heard before in the past, and I'm thinking about our colleague Craig Silly, is that people with vision problems have trouble at a lot of the traffic lights because they have different signals for what's a safe cross and what isn't a safe cross. So has there been work toward that end? Again, that Lighthouse, she kind of stole my thunder a little bit with Lighthouse for the Blind kind of thing, but that sort of thing. I mean, are you paying extra consideration to those sorts of, I mean, there's a large hospital network downtown. There's a lot of clinics. What sort of attention is going in terms of their input to this?
Yeah, that is something we are continually trying to improve, kind of as we update our signals, anytime we're touching the intersections and bringing them kind of to the latest standards and more up to date. But it is always a constraint with funding, but we are happy to reach out. We have a link on our website. If there's any group that would like a community meeting or just more information, we're happy to present and to be there.
Thank you.
Saw a hand go up over here. I thought. Maybe that's a question. Any other questions or comments? Hearing to be none, thank you, Ms. Kelly. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, next status report will be for the Hillsborough County Paved Trail Big Data Survey. Sarah Caper or Chris Fellerhoff?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Fellerhoff. I am with Hillsborough County's Community and Infrastructure Planning Department. And what I'm going to share with you today is results of a exercise we did recently that we call our Paved Trail Trip Survey. Are you seeing my screen there in the room now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so it's the dark blue slides that say Paved Trail Trip Survey.
Yes.
Okay, what this was, we're always looking for more information about how people are using our facilities. So earlier this year, we put out some feelers among our on-call consultants for ways to gather data about how many people are using paved trails in the unincorporated county and what purposes they might be using them for. In the past, we have done some research into these questions. Most recently, 3 or 4 years ago, we had an online user survey where we asked people which trails they use and how they, if they use them for recreation or commuting or what other purposes. And we got reasonable response of that, of over 500 responses. But when we kind of looked at the data, we saw that it was sort of clustered to some well-networked advocacy groups, and sort of we didn't feel it was representative of the whole community. And we also noticed that it was really certain trails and facilities were very, very popular and seemed to have well-organized advocate responses, which is, it's a good thing to have in the community, but it doesn't give you the whole picture. So we were looking for other ways to get more data. And some of our consultants and we had considered the idea of doing an intercept survey, but then we realized also that that could be very limited just by sort of the labor effort in and of itself of selecting which trails to go to and at which times and have people out there, and then hope we would get adequate response from people who agreed to take a few minutes off of whatever trip they were on to tell us about it. So what we ended up settling on was an idea pitched by one of our consultants that we would look at the possibility of a big data survey across our trails. And if you're not familiar with kind of the term, the big data is kind of a catch-all term for data that is acquired from other sources, and then we're able to look at it for various reasons. And there are a lot of vendors who are entering the transportation field right now with data gathered from a lot of different things, but one of the biggest ones is from the location data related to cell phone apps, not only GPS apps, but any application you might have on your phone where you share your location data. Those service providers end up kind of bundling that data and selling it for analysis. It's supposed to be anonymized at a certain level. But we wanted to see if kind of a foray into that kind of data could tell us anything about who's using our trails and for what purposes. And so we did settle on one vendor. There are a growing number of vendors, and I'll talk a little bit about the diversity of vendors later at the end. But we did settle on one who were able to then cut for us data of people who were observed through their shared data to be on one of our Hillsborough County trails between January and December of 2021. In total, as it says here, we had 17 trails we looked at, and we were able to subdivide those into 55 total analysis zones. So here on this map, you can see our trails we looked at were were spread fairly well across the county. They included both kind of separated recreational trails such as the Flatwoods Loop or the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, or the old Fort King Trail up on near US 301. Also a fair number of our side path facilities that are also operated by the county, scattered throughout the community. Two of these trails, number 2 up here in the north, which is along Oak Preserve Road, and number 17, which is the Bridge Trail within the Fishhawk community. Those are actually on property owned by homeowners associations. That Oak Preserve Road is actually within a gated community. But we had a lot of zones we were able to use, and so we thought we would include those in the data set too, to give us some extra data and things to compare. And the ability to compare between trails, I'll describe in a minute, is kind of one of the really most valuable things that we got out of this data. What we were delivered then was data of a number of types. There were spatial data that were kind of broken out in various ways. When somebody was observed within one of these zones drawn around the trail, the data that came with them could tell us up and down the trail if this person had previously been or started their trip, which we would call the origin zone, on a different zone of the trail, and then also the destination zones if they ended up further down the trail in a different zone. So it could give us some idea of how people are using the trail, if they're using the full length of the trail or just short portions of it. Could also look out a little bit further, and out of the data we could get the trip history that tells us if the person's trip originated or ended up in a different census block away from the trail as well. So we could look at sort of the trail contained, the trip contained within the trail, and then also the trip as it kind of came from outside in the surrounding community. We're also able to get temporal data and do a bunch of kind of high level analysis on it. And then we have all of, we just received like the big data package with all of these specific data to each of the trips that were looked at. But we're able to look at across the entirety of the year, you know, sort of summary statistics for each trail, breakdowns by month, breakdowns by day of the week, breakdowns that look at, you know, kind of the midweek pattern versus the weekend pattern across Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or across Saturday and Sunday. So there's a lot of different ways we can cut this data, and we set it up for to generate some sample maps and charts looking at various permutations of kind of the data categories I just described. And for those 55 zones across 17 trails, we ended up with an output of over 5,000 maps across all these trails. You know, looking at weekdays in March for bikes versus weekends in February for peds, on, you know, one of 3 zones on a given trail, or the longer trails such as the Upper Tampa Bay Trail have, I believe, 13 or 14 zones. So there's a lot of data, and it's divided in a lot of ways, and it's a lot to wade through. And I'm going to share with you a couple examples of kind of what it can tell us, and it's something we've only really begun to explore in great detail, but we see a lot of potential in it. So I want to show you some of the, just kind of a little interesting pattern we noticed out of the Town and Country Greenway, which is by no means kind of comprehensive of what this study could do, but gives you a little flavor of the sort of things we can observe from it. If you're not familiar with the Town and Country Greenway, it runs along a drainage canal, kind of a east-west trajectory between Sheldon and George Roads, and also between Hillsborough and Waters Avenue over there in the western part of the county, the Town and Country area. For the purposes of the study, we were able to divide it up into 3 specific zones. You can see on the map here. Zone A is on the west, Zone B is in the middle, Zone C is on the far east. The maps we've got do show, you know, some destinations in the area. We have both schools and parks kind of flagged with symbols on there. This green line here also shows you, and green lines up here show you, well, various symbols show you both sidewalks and bicycles in, bike lanes in the neighborhood. So I'm going to flip through a couple of slides here just to show some of the patterns. This first map and graph is showing the distribution of trips across time, across hours of the day, through the entirety of the year of 2021 for bicycles only in what we've called Zone A. So this is the westernmost portion. This sort of dark maroon color here on the left. So you can kind of see that an interesting pattern is that there's a little bit of a peak at around 7 or 8 in the morning. It dies off during the day. It picks up considerably in the late afternoon, and then there's a little bit of a tail higher than the midday that runs through the evening. But we start to see here in this area is that there is definitely a trend that I think we could associate it with commute times, perhaps school arrival and departure times, and then perhaps some sustained recreational use in the evening. And that's again for Zone A. I'm going to flip here and show you, and if you keep your eyes on the time graph there, you'll see the shift over into Zone B. A similar pattern with some slightly different details. You see still kind of a school time early morning spike, a mid to late afternoon rise, and so some sustained activity through the evening. And then I'm going to flip you again over to Zone C, which is the easternmost one. And again, you'll see the same general pattern hold with some difference, a more pronounced spike at school time, a more pronounced late afternoon rise, perhaps around school departure time, and then again, some higher activity in the evening than you get in midday. Again, which would suggest kind of distinct patterns of both kind of school commutes as well as recreational use in the evening. And now the next slide I'm going to flip, you'll still be focused on Zone C, but it's going to show you that was those previous 3 slides were the weekday trips. So that's collectively Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays throughout the year. I'm going to shift you over to the Saturday, Sunday weekend figure throughout the year for Zone C, and you'll see that that peak really falls away and you get a lower but consistent use throughout the day, which compared to the peaks with arrival and departure at school could suggest sort of a more consistent recreational use on the weekend times, especially considering that Zone C is next to a sizable park as well. So those are a lot of inferences, right, out of the pattern, but it gives us some insight into what's going on in the trails. And, you know, we've got these kind of data available across all the trails that I showed you. And this was just one little slice of looking at the year-long trends of bike-only trips for this one trail. So we could break out all the other ones in myriad different ways. Also, as I said, we look at, we were also provided with both origin and destination census block groups associated with these trail trips. And you can kind of see this is zoomed out considerably. The trail is still here in the middle. The vast majority of the trips that ended up on the trail originated in census blocks that are immediately adjacent to the trail. But you can see that in some, with lower frequency, there are also some trips that are originating further out and ending up on the trail, which kind of gives us some interesting patterns of use. Again, these are very low numbers, but nonetheless, people are arriving at the trails. And that's for the weekdays across the year. One interesting thing to notice when we go to look at the map for the weekends across the year, we get zoomed out even further. This is a very large census block, but that's actually up in Pasco County. And again, it's a pretty low frequency number, but it does show us that some people were ending up on the Town and Country Greenway on trips that originated well outside the immediate vicinity. And still, the people who live very close to it are also getting the majority of use of it. We also have various breakdowns of the data. Like I said before, looking at temporal data, we can break down by the month. This one, the previous ones I showed you were bike only maps and figures. This one it compares the bike and pedestrian use both across the months of the year. And it's interesting, they both seem to, you know, have a considerable dip through the summer months and perhaps in the midwinter months, but they have kind of separate peaks in the spring and fall. And what is kind of interesting to me is that the rather pronounced high month for pedestrians is in March, whereas the high month, slightly higher than the spring, but still the highest one for bikes is in September. I'm not sure what that means, but I thought it was an interesting contrast between bikes and peds. And here also we can get splits throughout the week. No particular data point here that's suggesting a particular story to me, but we've got it available, like I said, for all those trails. Close this down. So what are the lessons we've learned from this? There's a lot of opportunities here. I mean, we were able to get data across our entire trail network for a full year, which was a challenge that we certainly would not have been able to meet with an intercept survey or an online survey. We would have had to either make a decision or deal with highly selective data out of our respondents. And so this gives us much higher visibility than counts or surveys because we were able to get the full network across the whole year. It seems very promising for comparative analyses. We can look at time periods on the same trail or between different trails. Because these numbers, these data are coming from these private vendors who are looking at, you know, a somewhat self-selected ultimate data source of people who are using location data on their cell phones and allowing it to be shared. A lot of kind of what they produce as sort of definitive counts are highly processed numbers based on algorithms and inferences of their own, of the formulas for which are often proprietary. So we aren't really supremely confident, I'll say, in kind of representing those as absolute values of numbers of people that we see out there. But I think there is a lot of potential for comparative trends where we see rises and falls and peaks and valleys in the data that might suggest certain things. And another real value of this is just the immense volume of data. Like you said, we got over 5,000 maps out of this, and we've got the data provided as well, so we could actually, you know, cut it different ways and look for different graphs out of it going forward if we might want to investigate trends within one trail or another. The challenges, though, also include the volume of data because there's just so much there. Trying to figure out what actually it might mean or what stories it can tell will take some continuing work and analysis to wade through, and it's almost like too much to share with somebody in a brief presentation like this one. The other thing is that a lot of the outputs of the results of proprietary algorithms and programming. So with this particular vendor, we don't have a lot of visibility back into, say, just telling us how many actual, you know, individual cell phones with shared data, shared location were captured in that area versus what was kind of the process result of the algorithm, you know, extrapolating that out into a count or another larger number than the raw data. And we would have liked to see that. And in the process of doing this report, we you know, viewed presentations from numerous other vendors of this type of data. And we do see that some of them are a little more open with sharing the raw data versus the process data and have different kind of interfaces and ways we can deal with it. And so doing this at the same time that we got a lot of those pitches from other vendors was another one of the kind of the big, really kind of interesting learning opportunities with this, because we had already kind of generated our own report and analysis out of one source. We were able to evaluate what other vendors might be able to do in a similar effort. So those are kind of the highlights of the report, some of the challenges and the opportunities. Again, my name is Chris Fellerhoff with the Community and Infrastructure Planning Department, and I'll be happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Hi, I have a question.
Okay.
Well, nice work in terms of putting that big data to something useful and looking at things. So thank you. Are you going to take it further though, and perhaps have your department use it to inform some like qualitative analysis of these pathways? So for example, you saw that one in Town and Country is very related to school trips. So is there work intended to kind of look at the safety along that trail and maybe look at how kids are doing? Is there something to look at maybe the way night is on that trail and the experience of safety or something like that? Are you going to go one step further, or are you going to keep the big 30-foot picture?
We haven't made a decision about a specific follow-up, but we have, kind of, like I said, we got these sort of, those maps I showed you were part of the package of, if we analyze along these parameters and push a button across the whole data set, let's generate a bunch of these maps. And so there's so many of them, we had to kind of start looking through and saying, well, analyzing what those showed still, like all that, those distributions of the time that suggested to me, which I shared with you, school use versus recreational use based on out of that. We have committed to start kind of going through them, one by one, and, sketching out some potential kind of deeper analyses to do across all of them. We haven't decided what they are yet. We just kind of received the bulk of the data a few weeks ago and are sharing it with you while it's still pretty fresh. But we do intend to use it further to try and at least get kind of what I'm saying is sort of a short story about every trail, like what these data suggest is actually happening in the use. And I'll share with you, one of the things that I think this has potential for that we saw, like I said, I wasn't extremely confident in kind of sharing their sort of final numbers of people as, verified counts, if you will, but we have done some, actual direct counts in recent years, and we could take the opportunity to go back in the time, a common time period covered in this, and do some calibration to see how close this method got to the method where we had tubes counters on the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, for example. But even looking at some of those numbers, one of the high-level surprising things was, like those side path facilities, as a trail planner, are often unpopular. People say, that's not really the environment I seek out, a pathway right next to a busy road. But they appear to get a lot of use, and a lot more than really I kind of expected. Some of them were ranking up there in numbers as reported by this methodology that were very not too far off from what we also see on sections of the Upper Tampa Bay Trail and things like that. And we're trying to spend a little bit more time to figure out what that means, or if there's some oversight in the algorithm that might be mistaking, for example, slow moving cars caught in traffic. If these zones we drew have a little bit of a buffer space to make sure we get everyone out of them, if that zone sort of included the outside lane of the adjacent road and there's a lot of congestion there, we don't know all of the things that lead them to say this particular location sharing device is being held by a pedestrian or bicyclist versus someone sitting in a car. But we know that speed is one of those factors that, if they're under 7 miles an hour, they're probably walking. If they're between 7 and 15 miles an hour, they're probably on a bike. And they have other factors as well. But then I was thinking, well, if our zone, reached out into the road a little bit and found, a school pickup line or cars that are generally caught in traffic, could those be showing up as pedestrians? Or are there really that many people out there? I was talking yesterday at the BPAC about this, and or Wednesday, sorry, and I observed that there's a side path along Brandon Parkway, if you're familiar with that, that showed as having a really higher level of activity than I anticipated. And I thought, well, maybe, as people are waiting to get on the Selman or in traffic as they got off the Selman, that some of those cars just kind of in the queue were showing up as bicycles or pedestrians. Two people on the BPAC said, no, I live in Brandon, and you would be surprised how many people are out there walking or biking on that side path, which was, I didn't have direct experience of, and it hadn't been a site for our counts in the past. I think it will lead us to kind of take a closer look and do some observational work on some of these other facilities that we maybe don't think about first. And I think, especially in the interest of this committee, has a long way of getting around to, I think, sort of those side path facilities and other things which may not be as sort of glamorous or appear as comfortable as an independent trail, they do serve the non-choice riders, more directly as transportation. And sometimes, in the big picture, we're thinking about let's provide kind of the most pleasant and certainly want to make it as nice as we can. But I think I always want to remind myself that, those facilities that are close to roads and serving utilitarian trips rather than recreational trips are still very important. And if we can get data, the anecdotal data, opinion we get from people who are sort of advocates for the really nice trails tell us, oh, nobody really wants to ride there. Well, there's a lot of people who have to ride or walk there, and we want to make that nice as possible and not discount those facilities as well. And I think this data is suggesting there's more people actually using that than we might have guessed.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to old business, new business, 5310 program update.
DOT wasn't able to make it today. Tracy Noyes is out on military leave. Dave Newell is not feeling well. I don't have anything major here. They are doing training right now for prospective grant applicants. That process is being led by a consultant, Casey Kersey. It's virtual, so if anyone is interested in listening in on the application process for 5310, reach out. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you listen in. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's any other old business, new business will be December 16th is the next meeting. And then there's no other business to be done. This meeting is adjourned. Don't forget to go vote next Tuesday.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for jumping in.
It was a little.
Like you kind of,
Yeah.
you should.
Very.